Hello, my friends. My name is Gerdes. I'm just a professor providing context in the war in Ukraine. Here are 6 big stories and 2 memes. Now, one of those memes isn't even intentionally a meme. It's just, yeah, you'll see when you get to the end. Okay, while some countries, here's big story number 1, while some countries are kind of falling all over themselves to say, no, Ukraine, you can use our weapons in Russia, Italy is saying just the opposite. Italy prohibits the use of weapons for strikes in Russia. Each country makes its own decisions. We reiterate that we are not at war with Russia. NATO is not at war with Russia. So for Italy, the position remains unchanged, said the Italian foreign minister. And I guess they're just looking toward the reset after the war and making business deals with Russia when the peace comes. Meanwhile, big story number 2, the Czech prosecutor's office has charged the head of the Help Ukraine Foundation, Volodymyr Gergel, with embezzling subsidies for the integration of Ukrainian refugees. Now, this is terrible, and it's terrible for a number of reasons, but embezzlement's never good. But to do this kind of thing during a time of war, which gives Ukraine this terrible reputation, like they're actually getting better from the corruption that has been, but it's just adding to the narrative that, oh, they're all corrupt. According to the investigation, Gergel embezzled a significant part of the 20 million crowns, about 600,000 euros, that were provided by the Czech Ministry of Education for the work. Journalists believe that he's linked to Russia for laundering money. The Help Foundation received 2 subsidies which were to be used to teach Ukrainian children the Czech language. The foundation charged parents for the children's participation in programs that should have been free of charge and delayed payments to the center's staff. What an awful human being. Okay. Next big story. Russian companies are facing growing delays and rising costs on payments with trading partners in China. Well, why is that happening exactly? Well, here's a story in Reuters. Russian companies and officials for a few months have pointed to delays in transactions after Chinese banks tightened compliance. Well, why did Chinese banks tighten compliance? Because of Western threats of secondary sanctions. Okay, incentives have um, caused people to do or not do a thing. And when the Western banks were finally saying, you know what, you're going to get these secondary sanctions, they started paying attention. Okay, so Chinese state banks are shutting down transactions with Russia en masse, and billions of won worth of payments are held up. China is Russia's largest trading partner, accounting for a third of Russia's foreign trade last year. It also provides a lucrative market for many Russian exports that China relies on, such as oil and agricultural products. Russia doesn't tend to manufacture a lot of things, but being on a large gas station, as they are, they tend to sell their oil and gas and even their agricultural goods. Uh, After the U.S. Treasury in June threatened secondary sanctions on banks in China and other countries for dealing with Russia, Chinese banks started to take very strict stance on their transactions. How about that? All cross-border payments to China stopped. We found solutions, but it took about 3 weeks, which is a very long time. So what was the solution? Well, one working solution was to buy gold, move it to Hong Kong, and sell it there, depositing cash in a local bank account, one person said. But as a result, the cost to process transactions has risen as much as 6% of transaction payments from close to zero before. So it's having an effect. And that's going to be just one more piece of the puzzle of trying to slow things down. The question is, why didn't they do it before? Okay, next big story. Putin awarded self-proclaimed president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, the Order of the Apostle Andrew of the First Called, the highest state award in Russia, on the occasion of Lukashenko's 70th birthday. Putin also called him a wise and far-sighted politician. Well, he is probably the most successful dictator in the world right now, having been there for 30 years. And he got this fancy award, and he'll get to wear that. And he's always been cozy with Putin, and he's kind of like he's been a more successful dictator than Putin, but Putin is kind of like the big brother in the relationship. Now, in his 30th year as a brutal dictator of Belarus, Lukashenko's long history of nonsensical statements is probably only rivaled by that of his Moscow puppeteer. So what kind of weird statements are we talking about? Well, okay, it's better to be a dictator than gay, he says. Or I don't know what one has to do with the other, but okay. Our dictatorship does not prevent anyone from living and developing. Well, I don't think that that's the case. I think that's exactly what dictatorships do. Just witness what happened in North Korea as opposed to South Korea. Dictatorships are just not good for anyone. Lukashenko himself acknowledged in 2008, perhaps with a hint of irony, that he was deserving of the title dictator. Our dictatorship does not prevent anyone from living and developing. On the contrary, we are a partner for you, solving many problems for Western Europe. Sure. Okay. Yes, we rigged the last elections. Like he admitted that. We rigged the last elections. 93.5% voted for President Lukashenko, but they say this is not a European percentage. We made it 86%. It's true. Okay, well, at least he admitted it. That's the first step. He's ahead of Putin. We must, in short, undress and work. Okay, so that was just a slip of the tongue. Lukashenko mispronounced the Belarusian phrase for to develop with that of to undress in the blunder that his critics soon leapt upon. So it was supposed to be, we must, in short, develop and work. Okay. Belarusians should cling to Lukashenko even in the most critical situation, like a drowning man to a straw, because Lukashenko has never betrayed and will never betray. Never. Okay, well, that's good to know, but I don't think they want to cling to you. We need a couple of $1 billion of cheap money. Who doesn't? Putin is a colonel. He promised to appoint me as a colonel. He still hasn't done it. Lukashenko said Russian President Vladimir Putin promised to make him a colonel in the Russian army, to the amusement and bemusement of his interviewer. Lukashenko is also known for his nostalgia for all things Soviet. Now, I've been to Belarus, and before we went, we studied about Belarus, and yeah, Lukashenko is more Soviet than the former Soviet Union. Like, he wanted to recapture the glory of what was the Soviet Union and kind of reunite it. And he was a major force behind the Collective Security Treaty Organization, which was kind of like rebuilding post-Soviet states into a collective organization. Now, here's the irony beyond this award on his 70th birthday. Here's a campaign poster of Lukashenko's election campaign in 1994. The inscription on the poster reads, "The younger generation chooses Alexander Lukashenko. The era of 70-year-old rulers is coming to an end. Belarus needs new people and a new policy." Lukashenko turned 70 today and recently celebrated 30 years in power. Nobody should be in power for 30 years for anything. Like, organizationally, in a country, nothing. That's just bad. It's just not going to work out well for you. Okay, switching gears again, almost immediately after Mongolia cancels Russia's pipeline plans, Putin, for the first time, will visit the country obligated to arrest him under the Hague warrant. It's a big test for the rule of law that the rule of law is going to fail, as the Kremlin announces Putin's visit to Mongolia on September 3rd. So Putin wants two things. He's going to get a twofer out of this. One, he's going to try to figure out how to get the Mongolian pipeline thing to work between Russia and China, because remember, Mongolia sits right between those. And he's also going to test the ICC arrest warrant and show that, what are they going to do? How are they going to arrest me? Who's going to arrest me? Here's next up, Putin defies ICC warrant as he plans to visit Mongolia. He received assurances before his visit to Mongolia that he would not be arrested under an International Criminal Court warrant. Two people familiar with the Kremlin's preparations said. The September 3rd visit will be Putin's first to an ICC member country since the warrant was issued last March. As a signatory to the Rome Statute, Mongolia is obligated to execute the warrant and arrest Putin if he appears on its territory. There are no worries, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said. Putin is traveling to Mongolia under Chinese security guarantees. Mongolia will not go against China, although it does not want to quarrel with the United States. So Mongolia is literally between a rock and a hard place here. This is the ICC. Like, let's look at this first. Mongolia is here between Russia and China, right? You have maybe not the best neighbors, and you have to kind of go along with this. Although Mongolia doesn't have like a great love for China or Russia, they don't want to become more problematic. But here's the thing. Here's the ICC countries. In green are ICC countries that have subscribed to the Rome Statute. In orange and red and yellow are those that are either not ratified or not signed on, or signed but didn't ratify, or some of those things. Russia has not signed on. Mongolia has. So Mongolia is supposed to do it, but they're not going to do it, and it's going to be a test of the International Criminal Court system, and nothing's going to happen. It will fail. It's a paper tiger. I put this into Perplexity. I asked, Perplexity is an AI that's current and up to date. I asked, what happens to a country that refuses to enforce the ICC, the International Criminal Court order? So there's a lack of enforcement. The ICC lacks its own police force or direct enforcement mechanism. It relies primarily on the member states to enforce its orders and decisions. So if any ICC state just says, well, we're not going to do it, nothing's going to happen. Now, what can happen to that country? So it can be referred to the Assembly of States Parties. If a state party fails to follow through on its obligations to the ICC, the court may make a finding to that effect and refer that matter to the Assembly of States Parties, which is the ICC's governing body. This can lead to diplomatic pressure on the non-compliant country. And so what? What's going to happen? For cases referred to the ICC by the UN Security Council, continued non-compliance can be reported back to the Security Council. Oh no. The Council could then potentially take action, though this is subject to political considerations among Council members. There could also be reputational damage. A country's refusal to comply with ICC orders can damage its international reputation and credibility. So essentially nothing's going to happen. Putin knows that, and he's thumbing his nose at the ICC. Okay, next big story. Ursula von der Leyen is warning the second half of the decade will be high risk. We Europeans must be on guard. We must think about our union as intrinsically a security project. Now that's turning the EU kind of into almost NATO. So that's pretty strong words. Okay, I told you, I promised you two memes, and here's the first one. It wasn't intended to be a meme, but it kind of is. The best commander is the one who wins without fighting. This was Akhmat, that's the Chechen commander, Aludinov. You know, Sun Tzu was inspired by this mastermind. Yeah, there are billboards with him saying this. But the irony here is that the Chechens just kind of cut and run when they were in Kursk. So, you know, the best commander is the one who wins without fighting? Well, okay. And then finally, I had a goldfish that could break dance on the carpet, but only for like 20 seconds and only once. It's kind of like that. All right, my friends, thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.